the end of last year. It said it was because of findings in a report it had commissioned into the Albany midwifery practice. But the hospital wouldn't make the contents of the report public, leaving the midwives and new mothers in the dark about exactly what the problems were. Now, BBC London has got the report, and we've shown it to an expert who says its findings may not be right. Mark Ashdown reports.
Among new mothers, support for the Albany continues to grow. Sarah used one of its midwives during her labour. She wanted a relaxed home birth, but had complications. At hospital, it was very different. So your Albany midwife is there, and if she hadn't, what do you think would have happened?
If she wasn't there, I know for a fact that I would have had some kind of intervention, whether that be a four-step delivery or Von-2s. I may have even ended up having a caesarean because they were adamant that I needed to get the baby out. They literally said if I don't push this baby out in 15 minutes, they're going to use assistance.
So why has King's suddenly terminated its contract with the Albany? Well, the Trust says that it detected a high number of babies being born with serious illness. So last year commissioned a report into the midwives and based its decision largely on the findings of that. Now, these reports are normally made public straight away, but for whatever reason, this was kept secret until now. Under mounting public pressure, King's have finally released it. The report notes that based on the cases it was shown, the number of babies with serious morbidities was comparatively tenfold greater amongst Albany mums. But it says some staff at King's regard the midwives with clinical suspicion, and there's an openly antagonistic relationship. It recommends more education, training and support for the Albany to overcome the mutual lack of trust and professional respect.
If they were concerned about it, they should have gone to the Care Quality Commission.
Professor Alison McFarlane analyses this type of data. She's concerned the whole report lacks any kind of transparency.
It was unclear whether like was being compared with like, what definition was being used, how it was being interpreted, whether they took into... it was assumed that if there was a problem it must have been poor care rather than underlying factors which have been there already.
So quite flawed, really.
OK, let's go back to our top story about the Albany midwifery practice. Let's go back to that report now.
It was unclear whether like was being compared with like, what definition was being used, how it was being interpreted, whether they took into... it was assumed that if there was a problem it must have been poor care rather than underlying factors which have been there already.
So quite flawed, really, to draw any conclusions.
Yeah.
Supporters took the issue to the Department of Health before Christmas.
The Albany will see you right.
They point to the Albany's extremely low mortality rates as evidence this model of care is the future. The whole episode isn't doing much for midwife morale.
There is a sense, I think, that the Albany, because they're different and they work in a different way, if you like, sort of putting their heads above the parapet in some way, are being penalised for that. So it's caused anxiety and it causes great concerns amongst midwives.
King's told us,
"We are committed to midwifery-led care for women. We also believe strongly in giving women the right to choose a home birth. At 9%, King's has one of the best records of home births in the country."
So, where do we go from here? In the 1990s, Baroness Cumberledge urged a radical shake-up. Now she says the contracts of midwives should be held with the primary care trusts, not the hospitals.
It will be the primary care trusts who see the thing in a much wider perspective than a hospital who often finds this form of care very uncomfortable. It is very different. It is very, very woman-centred, and that doesn't always fit nicely into a trust policy or hierarchy.
The idea of a woman at home with two midwives is scary to a hospital. I think we have to remember that birth is not an illness, it's a natural process, and we have to allow for that. Midwives are experts in what they do, and they need to be trusted to do their job.
The Albany saga shows that demand for choice is growing, even if there's work ahead to overcome the obvious difficulties